Picture this for a moment. Red and white. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Candy canes? The YouTube logo? Supreme. That's what comes to most. Supreme as a brand has become synonymous with the crisp-cut lines of its Redbox logo. A classic. That's what Supreme fans call it. Supreme. It's a simple yet pertinent design that is still a favorite among Supreme's devoted audience. Fans who have their own name, hype beasts. Supreme heads for the younger 10 to 15-year-olds. How did Supreme become the king of underground fashion with such a large audience? It's all thanks to the unorthodox thinking of its founder, James Jebia. Humble beginnings. Founded in 1994 on Lafayette Street in Soho, Jebia doesn't think about Supreme the way his fans do, as a brand. His inspiration for Supreme came from his own trips down to London as a teenager in Crawley, West Sussex. Spare cash in hand, hunting down elusive stores to buy cool clothes, no big brands, no labels. Something that would eventually turn into the model for the first Supreme store. Exclusivity. Getting to press is usually one of the first steps for an upcoming business. The more people see it, the wider the audience pool and the higher chance of making a sale. At least that's what the average person thinks. For Supreme, more press is a concern. Supreme's model is based on the same elusiveness Jebia hunted for in his youth. Limited edition, that's the kind of vibe Supreme gives. It's something Jebia worked hard to maintain and continues to use to keep Supreme climbing. Other well-known fashion brands, Gucci, Chanel, and Prada, to name a few, combined spend $500 billion in advertising every year. Supreme has never invested in advertising. Supreme mostly relies on word of mouth and collaboration with influencers. As it stands, in order to even get access to Supreme product launches, most buyers have to participate in a lottery just to wait in line. That line, by the way, can reach up to 3 to 4 hours and stretch on for blocks. That's even with weekly Thursday drops of new products. A line that can get even longer if Supreme is collaborating with another well-known brand. During the Louis Vuitton x Supreme collaboration, the line was 600 people long. Those waiting would only be allowed access to 15 minutes per customer. How did a brand, one with such little advertising, get so big? Well, Jebia owes it to one massive factor. It's Supreme's audience. A tight-knit community. Supreme is more than just a brand. That's part of the reason why Jebia doesn't consider it a typical brand. Family and community are part of the reason Supreme has become as big as it is. Its audience, mostly that of 18 to 25-year-old men, are very loyal. Supreme has always stayed true to its roots, even after selling out to the Carlyle Group for 50% of its stake for $500 million. Their fans don't see it like that. Supreme collectors viewed it as a strategic move to protect the company in any future legal disputes. A corporation like the Carlyle Group at your disposal is exactly what they need. They praise the brand for not straying from their values or betraying their community to go mainstream. Sage Elliser, a pro skater who's modeled for Supreme before, praises Supreme for being family-oriented. Many of Supreme's fans, young skateboarders like Sage Elliser, see him less of an influencer and just a cool skateboarder like them. It's made fans of the brand extremely protective. So much so, many fans refuse to even consider wearing or owning dupes, counterfeits that merely look identical to the original. They'll just wait for the next drop or purchase from other fans, at possibly 3 times the price. A generation of collectors and entrepreneurs. When Jebia started Supreme, he had the same problem most starting entrepreneurs have: limited product. However, what Jebia did differently in regards to other mainstream well-known brands such as Nike is played it practical. Too much product could leave him with excess stock and not enough profit to continue. So rather than produce more than he could afford, he limited production. That scarcity proved to be the golden ticket to Supreme's future business model. Now, even though the company is valued at over $1 billion, Jebia produces even fewer stock in terms of quantity. While it does seem counterproductive to a traditional business model, Supreme has made scarcity work for them. Capitalizing on the feeling of elusiveness and limited edition items, Supreme sold out constantly. Collectors have been drawn to Supreme due to the uniqueness of the items. With limited quantities of specific Supreme product lines and collaborations, t-shirts and hats that were bought for $32 at the store can later be sold for 3 times the original price online. With a small amount of locations around the world, only 11 brick-and-mortar stores in the entire world, Supreme's audience discovered the lucrative side of being a hype beast. There are guides that teach people how and where to buy authentic Supreme items. Collectors and resellers will wait outside the few Supreme shops after a drop, offering to pay those leaving, purchases in hand, more than what they paid for. A few collectors have mentioned that the lack of a Supreme store in China, save for a new fake Supreme store in Shenzhen and other countries, has led to an increase in a special kind of tourist. Specific travelers that will visit the nearest Supreme store and buy thousands worth of merchandise. Once they're done, they go home and give the items to buyers seeking authentic Supreme products. Many collectors have made thousands off reselling their Supreme collection while keeping a few rare pieces for themselves. Supreme hasn't taken any action to stop these young collectors from making a profit, yet. While Supreme has had its fair share of legal battles, they haven't gone after the fans that gave them their billion-dollar worth. It's one of the reasons they are so well regarded among their audience. Controversy. It takes a lot to get Supreme talking. Most of the time, Supreme takes a back seat, and if it can help it, stays out of the news as much as it can. However, there have been a few occurrences where Supreme has made headlines, most of it over the use and copyright of the logo itself. Supreme wasn't the creator of the crisp red box with white Futura text. Supreme was inspired by the artwork of feminist artist Barbara Kruger. Kruger, now 72 years old, wasn't that impressed when Supreme made headlines in 2013 when they sued Married to the Mob, a smaller fashion brand that was trying to copyright their own product line, Supreme Bitch, with the same red logo and white Futura print for $10 million. Supreme would later drop the case. However, it was not before Barbara got in a few of her own unique burns. What a ridiculous clusterfuck of totally uncool jokers, Kruger wrote. I make my work about this kind of sadly foolish farce. I'm waiting for all of them to sue me for copyright infringement. Supreme has since left companies like Married to the Mob alone. However, complete ripoff stores such as Supreme Italia are being put to a stop. Supreme Italia in 2019 announced a collaboration with Samsung. It was something that the real Supreme, Supreme NYC, did not take lightly. This time, Supreme did not settle or drop the case. They won $10 million in damages and jail sentences for the father and son duo that started Supreme Italia. While there is certainly some hypocrisy, like Supreme copying certain brands during their early years, the brand has learned its lesson. Rather than rip off, Supreme now strives to keep their authenticity by collaborating. Not a brand, a community. If there's one thing Jebia learned as he built Supreme, it's to not compromise on values. Supreme's become synonymous with the in-group of a younger, more fashionable audience that wants a piece of the culture. That's what Supreme is, after all, a culture of people. It's what keeps people talking and Supreme growing. Supreme isn't afraid of taking risks because it knows its fans will be there to buy and, even more important, talk. They even released a brick with the Supreme logo on it. Why? No one knows exactly, and people are still scratching their heads. What better marketing tool that keeps the hype going? With a loyal community behind it, it's no wonder Supreme has become worth so much today. Supreme's success can be attributed to a variety of aspects: a devoted fan base, turning small stock into an event, a CEO that fights to keep their company true to its roots, and more. Supreme, like its audience, went against the grain and came out more successful than some of its predecessors. That's what made them worth $1 billion, and they earned every single penny.